Hey,
Well, hello.
Hello.
Yeah, Lance.
Hi, folks. How are you all doing?
hey Benji.
Doing well. Hope you're doing well too.
Okay, it looks like we're all here. It's a very Apollo-centric meeting, so good times.
I guess we're
Um,
riding the high. We just released 3.10 today, the client, so I think we're all
Amazing. I see those
basking
smiles.
in
That's
it.
wonderful. Okay. Well, I'll since we are not expecting anyone else that I know of, I know Yakov reached out and said that he can't make it today. I'll kick us off. By being here, we have all agreed to the specification membership agreement, the participation guidelines, the contribution guide, and the code of conduct, links to all of which are in the meeting agenda. Let's start by introducing ourselves. I'm Benji from GraphQL.
All right. I'm Gerald from Apollo.
I'm Lens from Apollo.
And I'm Jeff from Apollo.
Wonderful. Thank you all. Ideally, if you can help take notes whilst we chat, it's always thanks, Jeff. It's always a challenge when, especially in a small meeting, when everyone wants to talk and no one's writing the notes. So yeah, if we can all contribute to that, it'd be very helpful. We apparently only have one thing on the agenda today, which is a suggestion on bundling in version 17 to do with ESM, CJS, and the dual package hazard. Oh, as a Node.js maintainer, as a maintainer of node modules myself, yes, I feel this pain very much. Okay. I'm just going to have a quick look and see if there are any action items that we need to look at. There are none that are marked as ready for review. And as far as I know, no advancement has been made on any of the other ones, or at least nothing that I've been made aware of. So we'll skip over that this week. In which case, I will hand it over to you, Lens.
Yep. So I'm gonna recap a little bit how I think we got here. There's been a bit back and forth, and I've tried to puzzle the whole thing together. Essentially, from what I understand, there was at some point a plan to make GraphQL.js ESM only. Then there was you don't know the history too. Great. Then there was apparently pushback. There is a GitHub issue that I linked in there, where essentially the question came up if there are still packages out there who are Common.js, how would they even consume GraphQL.js? So I believe there was a rollback, and there was a start to publish GraphQL.js ESM as an ESM-only package, and GraphQL.js 17 in the same manner as GraphQL 16, which essentially contains ESM modules and Common.js modules, which are distinct from each other. And that's also where GraphQL.js 16 is right now. And essentially, that's the source of the whole dual hazard in the title. We recently had our colleague Alessia dive into testing a lot, and for the life of her, she couldn't get vtest running with GraphQL.js as soon as she started adding like one or two more ecosystem libraries. The thing about vtest is it tries to import ESM everywhere. But some of these libraries that she tried to use were Common.js only. So these libraries were pulled in as common.js, also starting to pull in a GraphQL.js as common.js. So the runtime had both of them running, and essentially, as soon as you get to that instance of check that, make sure that you only got the library loaded once, the whole thing dies down. And that's essentially the world we are in right now. You cannot use vtest as soon as you start pulling in a few more dependencies with GraphQL.js because it will die on you. And that's not really a nice experience for anyone. There are like a lot of GitHub issues where people try to reconfigure vtest to only load common.js or to patch modules all around and stuff like that. But none of these solutions is really satisfying. So I did remember a conversation that I had about a year ago with oh god, let's call him Underwrist. I can't pronounce his real name. Who is maintainer of XState, Emotion, Redux Saga, and like a dozen other big packages. And he walked me through their setup to prevent this dual package hazard, which essentially is bundling common.js and then also containing ESM modules that just re-export the common.js entry points. That's like the entry points that would be picked up by Node.js, for example. And what he does on top of that is that he also has an ESM only module that's shipped under that module flag that will only be picked up by bundlers, and that one would always ignore the common.js one because bundlers will always go for the module and ignore the other two entry points. So he got to a way where you would end up with only one copy of GraphQL.js, still have support for common.js, have support for ESM without going one of both ways only, essentially getting around that. I think it's a very hacky and not very nice solution, honestly. But in the last 1.5 years, I've spent a lot of time with bundling myself. I've watched Mark Erickson from Redux rehash the whole Redux bundling story, and honestly, it's extremely complicated. And all the time, I haven't seen a better solution. So I wanted to propose that we essentially apply a similar solution as Underwrist did with these packages, because I believe it's probably the most compatible one that we can get.
Okay, well, thank you for the summary. We've just had someone join the meeting. I don't think you're in the agenda yet. Would you like to introduce yourself? Potentially not. Okay, we'll carry on. So, yeah, this is a big issue, and it's one that I've faced myself as well in many situations, often when it comes to things like Webpack bundling, for example. If you directly require something, maybe it's common.js, but then something's ESM down the chain, and then that requires it can go into ESM mode and vice versa. And then you end up with, even though you've made sure that you've only got one version of the module installed, you still end up with two versions of it in memory, which is far from ideal. And this is on top of the problem that is quite common of ending up with more than one version of the module installed, which is a separate issue to this, but it is still related. A solution to the latter would also solve this somewhat, but nonetheless, it's better to ensure that you have exactly one version of GraphQL in memory, because otherwise you're just wasting memory and you're being less efficient, even if we do find a way to work around the instance of stuff, which personally, I'm not convinced that we should. I think it's fine how it is. So to bring us back onto the topic of ESM versus CommonJS, I think the approach of effectively Node only ever being able to import it as CommonJS makes a lot of sense. Where I see there being problems with that, and that's including the fact that there's an ESM shim effectively that just requires into the CommonJS. Where I see problems with that is that there are actually quite a significant number of situations in which people are still bundling their server-side Node.js. And I'm not 100% sure that in all those situations, they're bundling the entire thing. So I worry that there will still be a crossover there. Things like AWS Lambda and serverless as ways of needing small JavaScript files that are already bundled comes to mind. Also things like, I guess, Next.js, which I think also does bundling of the server side. Now, if we can be sure that all of them go into the module path and they just do ESM only, then that's fine. But I'm not 100% sure that that is the case.
That's actually something where GraphQL.js is one step different from all of the other packages because we allow deep imports, what the other packages do not allow. So essentially, the result of doing this would be that we had a export condition in the package JSON, hopefully with wildcards included that would do this for every single file that's packaged. And if wildcards are impossible here, that would mean that we would have that blob with all the different definitions, like if you want to go to this file and you're a bundler, then take that file in a very long package JSON. But I believe we can make it work with wildcards. That's something that I haven't tested out yet, but I would probably that's one of the first things I would get into when actually trying to do this. But I didn't want to get ahead of myself there.
That's fair. I'm not 100% sure that the intent of GraphQL, the NPM module, is that you can import from subpaths. The vast majority of in fact, pretty much the entire public API is available via the direct import. There are other utilities that exist that are not available through that. I know because I've integrated quite deeply with GraphQL.js, but I don't think that those are technically part of the public interface. And I think that GraphQL.js reserves the right to break those at any time. So using export maps to make it extremely explicit that you can only import from the main package, I think would actually be desirable for GraphQL.js. And if there are utilities that people need that can only be accessed through subpaths, we should either explicitly export only those subpaths, or we should export those capabilities as top level.
I'm just thinking here. I mean, of course, we would have that right in a major version to do those breaking changes. It goes a little bit against my current hope, which would be that you can just, if you try to use vtest or something and you have old libraries, you could just at least swap in GraphQL 17 alpha and things would start working for you. Because right now, this is like just a new part of the ecosystem that's completely broken off and can't use that. I am a bit afraid of doing that breaking change, to be honest. But if we did, we could also do something like rolling up the whole build into one file, which probably would make it easier to tree shake with the right annotations in the resulting bundle. But as I said, I'm not sure if actually restricting that would be helpful with adoption.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think anyone who's importing things from subpaths should be requesting that those things are top level exports. So it might be that if they change to GraphQL 17, their one-time change in their code base would be replacing all the GraphQL /something/something with just GraphQL directly.
My main concern here is other libraries, not people's code bases.
Yeah, absolutely. So that will, of course, require pushing updates to those modules to npm or using things like patch package. But yeah, I think if we're going to adopt exports, I think we should do so in a way that is very intentional. And I think it would be a good time to make some of those private APIs explicitly private. And if that causes some pain, I think that is why we have a major Semver bump. So I'm somewhat okay with that. The best time to do that is, when we release the first version, but the second best time is now. Get it done with.
It would definitely make it a lot easier to do all of this change, honestly. So I'm not completely opposed to it. I'm just bringing up that it will create a lot of churn in the ecosystem.
Okay. I should also point out, as I do at each of these meetings, that I am not the GraphQL.js maintainer. I am literally just the host of this meeting to try and enable other people to work on GraphQL.js. So these are very much just my opinions and not the opinions of the project.
True, but among the people who are here right now, you're definitely the one who has been around for the longest.
Fair enough.
Okay.
So I actually wrote a question for you only an hour or so ago. I'm not sure if you saw it yet.
No, didn't see it yet.
Oh, and in fact, Yakov has actually replied to my question. So my question was, I was trying to understand the the example that you gave with xstate has the module export, and it has both the import and I think it was default. Import and default, yeah. So the default effectively fills the require part. What my question was is, since effectively Node can already import from common JS files using the import syntax, and that is exactly what that MJS file is doing, right? It's just doing import curly braces a bunch of stuff from the common JS file. Why do we even need that stub file? Why not just have why not just have module for bundlers and default? Is the fact of having the import version there important somehow?
That's a very good question. I probably my gut feeling would be to not be crucified on Twitter for releasing a CommonJS only package.
But it's just smoke and mirrors.
Absolutely.
Okay,
but I would have to ask Andres if there's another reason than that.
I'm just having a quick read of Yakov's response. So Yakov's question is actually quite a good one. It's effectively, are there any ESM only environments that don't honor the module import type that this might break? And I'm thinking like maybe alternative runtimes like Bun or Deno or any of the others. Do any of those have issues with this? Because with the ESM importing from the CommonJS, if those runtimes were to lack CommonJS compatibility, then this still wouldn't solve the ESM problem for them.
Maybe browser. But that's the only I could think about of right now. So if someone would actually consume this from a CDN, they would have to point to the module entry point, or the CDN would have to auto-transpile it. But on the other hand, both of these would probably automatically happen.
Something to research, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, to a certain degree, I just see the solution, and I see that these libraries already use it, and it hasn't broken in the last year or two. So I'm kind of positive towards that direction. I'm a bit hopeful, but I guess browser would something they probably wouldn't use for something like emotion. So I'm not entirely sure.
Okay, well, something to look into. In the meantime, have you got what you need? Have you got the feedback you need? What do you want to do going forwards?
I have the interesting proposal from your side to just do a roll-up. And honestly, for getting started, I believe that might, or you just want to enter from the index.js. I believe the easiest way to do that would be some kind of roll-up of the whole package, whole bundle. If I were to go that direction, I would have everything. The question is, should I?
So this is actually more of a user question for GraphQL.js rather than something for this working group itself. So I think that's a question that might be worth bringing to the main GraphQL working group and basically saying, if you use GraphQL.js in any of your projects, do you use these subpath imports? And if so, what do you use them for? I'm thinking things like for example, the guild might be using subpath imports when they do things like their envelope system. I don't know that they do. I'm just thinking maybe they do. Like maybe if they just want to pull the parser out, maybe they import that from the parse tree. I've not tried this. I don't know enough about this to know whether that's anything that they're actually doing. But if you want to, for example, include the GraphQL.js parser in your bundle, but not worry about the actual executor, maybe the subpaths are being used. That doesn't prevent us from doing this. It just means that we need to know exactly which of the explicit subpaths we need to support. And it might literally be parse, validate, execute are exported as their own separate endpoints.
There are a few that I could also think of from packages that we maintain. I think the rationale behind directly importing is that we assume that it's going to be easier to tree shake for all the bundlers that consume our library.
Yeah.
And we don't know what consumers exactly that are, so we're trying to make it as easy as possible for them. Which is honestly a valid point.
Yeah,
But
I think so too.
If it warrants that, I'm not sure.
So I think it's reasonable to do that, but that isn't going to be to the granularity of every single file that GraphQL.js builds. So maybe as part of this, you could do some exploration and figure out what paths people are actually using and which ones of those we actually would want to support. I think there's some such like regex searches that you can do over the entire of GitHub. So it might be worth using one of those services to really get a deep understanding of how it's being used in the wild.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Making a point of order here. Something like this, could be a disruptive change. Are we one question, open question for the project is V17 the right place for an effort like this? I know V17 already has a good amount of feature surface area in it. Is this something that that should be tackled in a separate version, say, or are we comfortable as a project omnibussing it through 17 along with the incremental transport items and some of the other valuable features in version 17. Is this maybe coupling those two too closely? I guess part of the answer might be how disruptive do we expect the user land changes to be or the downstream changes to be from this? So perhaps it's not like something we can resolve in the short term without a proof of concept, but just a thing to flag as an open question, maybe. I don't know.
So
yeah, go on.
my reasoning here would be that we should do something with a dual package hazard in V17 because it's a different ecosystem now than it was in V16. And if we don't immediately do a V18 after it, it should be done sooner rather than later. The problem with that is that we would create that exports field, and by doing so, everything we put in the exports field now would become an official entry point to the library, not only by being a file on your file system, but also by explicitly being named in the package.json. So if we did that step where we exposed every single file in V17, which would be the not breaking anything, but just mending breaks out there version, then we would have closed the door for what Benji suggested, that we only have the main entry point. It would, of course, still be possible, but it would be extremely confusing in communication if we first opened the door to officially import all of these and then closed it again.
So, as my understanding from Ivan is that the version 17 is effectively or what is currently like the main branch is a playground for incremental delivery. And obviously we were intending on getting a version of that out, but some major issues were found in in effectively the protocol around it. And so those are still being worked out, and they're getting towards the end, but nonetheless, they are not yet ready to be released. Version 16 is still the latest stable version. So what I think I would do in your shoes is I would branch off of the latest release of version 16, and I would add your features to that. I would imagine, and I would imagine that the number of changes that you need to make to the TypeScript or JavaScript files themselves is minimal. And I would also encourage you to keep that minimal to make forward porting that relatively straightforward. But I can imagine a world where we effectively release just this as a V17 if it looks like incremental delivery is not going to be out for a long time. So I don't think we should hold up the release of the ESM on incremental. And I also share your concerns with regard to making those things explicit. At the moment, it's not really an issue because V17 is in alpha. So we wholly reserve the right to break anything about it, remove any APIs or whatever. Obviously, we will try not to do that without a very good reason, but nonetheless, we are well within our rights to do so. And anyone who's using GraphQL seriously should be using V16, really. So yeah, that is the approach that I would recommend. But again, I'm not the maintainer. There currently is no maintainer. But that is nonetheless what I think would probably be the most likely best route forward. We do need to actually figure out the maintenance situation. And I think effectively what's going to happen is we'll just have a whole bunch of co-maintainers that come on a call like this, make group decisions, and then go with that until we have someone to lead us.
Sounds very good to me. So I would go that approach for now.
Okay, awesome. So as a summary of what we've discussed, you're going to explore the method that you've proposed. You're going to find out whether that ESM file is actually required or not. Even if it's not required, it seems like a minimal thing to add. It's just I wanted to get an understanding of exactly why it's there. You're going to have a look at the various different ways that the ecosystem is using GraphQL.js and see whether there are subpath imports. Well, I mean, there are. See what they are and how frequently they are being used, and which ones we feel should actually be public interfaces.
Yeah.
And also look into whether this will have a knock-on consequence for alternative runtimes and anything that isn't a bundler and isn't Node.js. What are those things, and will they be affected by this? And then if you are going to start doing any actual work on actually implementing this, you'll do so on a branch off of the latest v16.
Sounds good. This is a long list. Jeff has been taking notes, but we have a recording of this, and I can listen to this list again, right?
Indeed, yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, I've been trying to take down notes and everything. We'll chat too. So.
I'll try, and if I haven't published the video tomorrow, send me a ping on Discord and I'll get it published. I have to wait for it to upload and process and stuff before I can trigger it. Yep. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for stepping up to address this issue. It is a big one, and it is important. So yeah, I think we're doing the right thing to explore this space more. Are you thinking of coming to the main working group to try and gather more opinion, or are you going to rely on the GitHub code search capabilities?
Oh gosh. It probably depends a little bit on the time zone, I would assume.
I could always take that action item too. I usually am at the main working group, so I could always ask people to follow up there, or one of us will be there, or many of us, I don't know, and we'll go from there. But yeah, I think we probably should try to do as much automated search as we can, but also like, get people to tap us on the shoulder as well on what use cases they really value. So you can always put out like a we'll figure it out.
Asking is usually the most polite way to do something like this, not only digging in people's code bases.
I suggest that you write a very brief and very precise description of the information that you want from people, what you're planning to do and what information you want to back up your decision. Yeah. And then you effectively make it like a 1 or 2 minute agenda topic where you say, I don't want questions on this. This is just me telling you this thing that I'm planning to do or that I'm researching. Please send me the feedback asynchronously. And then you just add that to the next agenda for the main GraphQL working group, whoever. Jeff often comes, so Jeff could present it if you want. And yeah, that might be a good way of just gaining just a little bit of feedback. Even people who don't attend the meeting do tend to look at the agenda. So having a link to it from the agenda so that people can just click on it, see your like 1 or 2 paragraphs, I think would be a great way of beginning to get some of that feedback trickling in.
Thanks a ton for walking me through the politics, because I have no clue so far. So really heartfelt thanks.
Awesome. I'm also happy to represent documents like this as well. So if you prepare something and send it my way, I will just present it in the working group if you can't attend. So that's fine too. Excellent. So I think that's the end of that agenda topic. Does anyone want to talk about anything else?
There would be one thing. There was a lot of back and forth about one pull request or 5 pull requests. The global list check. And I think we came up with something that could at least be merged for now and would break fewer people. And Joey also noted that at some point in his pull request. 4022, this one. So is it
2022?
4022? I've linked it in the chat.
Cool. Yes, this
That
is
one.
this is an interesting one, because I don't fully understand the ramifications of effectively undoing this change. I mean, it seems fine, but there was presumably a reason that this was put in the first place. I have actually, earlier this week, I did reach out to Lauren to see what his feedback was on this. He's not yet got back to me.
I can say so far that the main reason that this change was made is because in browser event environments, process doesn't exist. So if you ever try to use GraphQL as a module import in a browser, it will just crash.
Right. So they moved to using global this, which does exist. But they could have just done type of process, because that's fine and it works around the problem.
The problem with type of process, on the other hand, is that ESBuild cannot replace type of process because it's a statement and not just it's not only a statement. It's like one bigger AST piece they can't replace. So they can only replace variable names, but they cannot replace full statements. So
Yeah.
ESBuild could never tree shake type of process, which was the argument against doing that, because that means that you always bundle off that.
That makes sense, because they would do a string-based replacement effectively for process.env.nodenv, but we've got other parts of the logic before that, so it can't be tree shaken away. Yeah,
that's what Vite does. Vite does a regex replacement, so they choke on the global disk before now. And what ESBuild does is that they actually look at the abstract syntax tree and only replace specific nodes. So they can't replace anything that has a type of in it, because it's not the type of node they would look at. And there's also explicit statement from the maintainer of ESBuild that they will never add that because it's wrong from their perspective. It's a horrible rabbit hole.
So what this ultimately says to me is that we effectively want a import from GraphQL and an import from GraphQL/development or something like that.
I believe we can do away with that also in that V17 with exports, export conditions, because there's a development condition and a production condition, and we can split on that. And
that is good, because that would then cascade through the dependencies as well, right?
Yes. And that would mean that there's like a slight number of bundles that probably neither pick up development nor production, and those would still see this wacky, weird check that's not working. But every modern tooling would pick up on either development or production and wouldn't have that problem. So the more tools adopt this, the better it would get over time. But it would still leave this check in, and there was the suggestion to do the additional test on process env. Yeah, this was not the one I was hoping for. We can go back to writing on all of this. Like, I was hoping for a check for global list.process and global list.process.env and global this process ends.node ends. That way, it would be made sure that everything exists, type of wouldn't be mentioned, and we go over global this, which is probably the best solution on this. Generally, would it be fine to move that just back into the GitHub discussion? Because I think Joey wants to have a word there too.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. Just one thought. So is the issue just the fact of the global this itself existing is causing further problems?
It's also causing problems, but only problems in bundlers that clearly do wrong stuff, like string replacements without checking if it's actually the start of a variable name.
So could we just extract a property const process equals global this.process and then go from there?
That would make bundles checking impossible. It's a weird running in circles thing. Because yeah, they wouldn't follow that. I've written it down at one point, so I can just look up all the arguments pro and con and put them also in an issue, and there we discussed that there with a few more people, because I feel kind of bad just putting in my position here, and I know that other people have others.
Yeah, this is a challenging one. This seems relatively urgent, but also we don't have like a lot of people at this meeting to make this decision. So what I propose that we do, if this can wait, let's say 5 to 6 weeks, we post into that, or I will post into that, and I will say, we're going to discuss this one last time at next GraphQL.js working group. Please get all your feedback in before then, because in that working group, we are going to make a decision, and then we're going to follow through on that decision. Effectively, we just need to push for that feedback with like, if we don't hear anything else, here is what we're going to do.
Perfectly fine with me. I just wanted to bring it up because, I mean, it's been there for a year. It's perfectly fine if it's 1 or 2 more months. But also I wanted to bring it up before it's open forever.
Okay, yeah. I don't even know when the last release of GraphQL.js was. The last version 16 release.
I think it was
19th.
the one that did this break.
Gosh. Yeah, that was
Looks like September 19th of last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was like one little hot fix after this break, and I think that was the last one.
Okay, well, fixing a breaking change in the main release line seems reasonable, and I would be open to, if no one can agree on a path forward, I would be open to literally just undoing whatever the original fix was and going back to whatever the previous state was. That would be the more Semver accurate way of dealing with it. Nonetheless, what you have here looks absolutely fine to me, so that's probably, I mean, it's already got my approval on it. Like I approved it a while ago.
Actually, this is the one I don't agree on. Yeah, I'll do a write-up because it's like talking about binary statements and binary logic and like in talking without writing it down is pretty pointless, I believe.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, well, in which case, do you want to take the action of basically writing up a summary of this problem? Ideally one that can be presented to the broader ecosystem, because again, this is another thing that I would like to call out in the main working group and say, we have this issue that's been introduced. We need to solve it. We've got options A, B, and C. If no one says anything else, then we're going to go with option B. You've got a month. Let us know what you think.
I'll do a write-up. I'll add it to the next agenda to the GraphQL.js working group. And if you think it's a good idea to bring it to the other working group, please do so. It's probably better if you go forward with that from there.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. That working group is in just over a week, so you'd need to get it written up reasonably soon. Perfect. Okay. Good. Was there any further topics?
Nothing from my side.
Yeah, nothing here either.
Okay. In which case, I'll call this the end of the meeting. Thank you all for being here and for the interesting discussion, and catch you next month.
Catch you next month.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for doing
Around.
this.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.